Cover my trick or treating.
He'll take them out whenever you want.
There we go.
So anyway,
All right, good evening and welcome to the City Council special meeting of Tuesday, October 17th, 2023. There are three items on the agenda. The first of those is an update on ARPA Affordable Housing Project. Anthony.
All right, so previously I gave you guys an update back in September on this project. One thing that you guys expressed is that you wanted me to come back and kind of explain a little bit more in detail on where some additional funds would come. So that's kind of where this, it'll be a pretty short presentation just to give you that information and get your feedback. Again, recap, we had that council conference. But since then, we've also had some more traction on this project I want to give you an update about. On September 28th, again, this is also involving a rezoning. There was a pre-development meeting. No residents attended that meeting. October 12th, we had the Planning Commission meeting. We did get a unanimous recommendation of the zoning and preliminary plat. It was a vote of 6-0, and there were no protests filed for the zoning application. And so just to kind of go forward a little bit, on October 24th, your next regularly scheduled council meeting, you will have the term sheet with the developer. And just to kind of recap and provide a little bit more detail than what I gave you last time, 75 affordable housing units for this project that will be mandated to be affordable for multiple agreements, multiple layers of that for 40 years. And those units are affordable at 30 to 60% of AMI, so that's below the average medium income by that amount. The ARPA funds we're using the 5.5 million. You guys originally allocated 6.4. Some of that was used for the Emergency Operations Center, and then some of that was used for the purchase price of the property. But that's about how much we have left over in that account. That will be used for a loan at 3% interest paid over 30 years. And that's really great because the federal government relaxed some of the requirements to use ARPA funds for affordable housing projects. So now, since we're using it as a long-term loan on an affordable housing project, any payments made as pursuant to this loan do come back free and clear of any ARPA requirements, and they are not subject to the what's called the project payment rules. So those will no longer have ARPA requirements once those are paid back.
Councilmember Grant.
Yes.
do the payments come back to us just to the general fund, or do we allocate them to affordable housing?
So that is going to be something that we talk to you about later down on the line. We are working on, as we've told council in the past, we would like to see, some sort of like housing trust fund set up like other cities have started to do. And we think that this is a potential revenue source for that fund. I think that's going to require a little bit more work. So we're working away at that. And we'd like to bring you that proposal, and we would like to include this. If that is set up, we would like those funds being put into that account. So yeah, you do, but if council does not want to put it towards affordable housing in the future, they could use that for something different as we get those payments.
I'd like to lock it in on affordable housing, honestly. But
And that's kind of why we did it that way. And I think this is a really great opportunity to utilize one-time funding and create it into like a revolving loan program.
If we put it into a revolving situation in there, is there any way of taking it out if we had to have it for some catastrophe or something like that? Or is it locked in?
I think that kind of depends on how council sets it up.
Okay.
I think you can, there would be no ARPA strings
No.
for that, but I think that would depend on how council sets it up.
like more than our rainy day funds can cover?
You never know. It's just if something ever happened that we needed a great deal of money, and 500,000 is a lot, $500,000. As we sit down, if we're continually rolling that over and getting interest on it, it may be a way that we want to change that sometime in the future. I don't know. I can't think of a situation. Just I hate to lock stuff in, like you get a loan for school or whatever, and you're locked into that for the rest of your life. And
Well, I would say in a catastrophe situation, people having stable housing,
would
access
be
to
good.
it.
Yeah.
I don't foresee a future where that's
I
not a
hope
good
not.
thing.
I hope not. Anyway, sorry.
So the last meeting, I told you that completion date was set for sometime summer 2026. we narrowed that down a little bit. And because we're proposing that, or allowing the developer to do 2 rounds of federal funding or 2 application periods if they don't get it the first time, we made that contingent on when they got federal funding, so it just made more sense. So that it could either be summer of 2026 or around this time of 2026. And then this is what I really wanted to talk about mostly at this meeting, which was the proposed contract term that we provide $500,000 of site work and infrastructure work to the property, such as the Imhoff Road widening that would be required to be completed for this project. So based on your feedback last time, we were able to find somewhere in the budget where that money was available. But just to kind of clarify, our contribution to any site work would not exceed $500,000, even if the site work was more than $500,000. Our obligations would stop once we reached the $500,000 mark. The developer would be responsible for the remainder. And the reason why we're proposing this is because, in order to get, the federal funding from the tax credit program, it's a competitive process, meaning that, it depends on how many people submit applications. Those applications are judged and they're scored, but the way that they are scored, it is competitive, meaning that and they factor it in using cost efficiency of each development. So the more efficient you can create the development, the better your application scores. This is a really great way, we think, to increase our chances of receiving the federal funding and making our application more competitive. This is very important, and this is something that, because this is ARPA money, we have a timeline and a deadline where we have to expend these funds and obligate these funds. So it's very important that we do secure federal financing before that time runs out. So we want to be very aggressive in making sure our application is competitive, because only, I think, 2 or 3 applications in any given application cycle actually do get funded. And we have no idea how many would get submitted, but we are expecting a high number of applicants this funding round. So, and like I said, funds are available. We did identify a account. There's $900,000 in it currently. That was set up to pay the Asp Avenue parking lot. There's a balloon payment in there. That was why we put that aside. That obligation was actually paid from another account, so these funds are free for use. So that's where we're proposing the money come from. So at this point, we just want to make sure that council is comfortable with that.
Councilmember Shu.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of laying out that our full obligation for this would only meet, not exceed the $500,000. I think the last time we talked about this, we were all interested in, making sure that the application that we put forward is the most competitive one that we possibly can, because without that funding, this project doesn't exist. Yeah. And so I think it's really important to make sure that we are enabling the applicant and the developer to really go out and, hopefully secure these funds. I'm also glad to see that there's money in the budget that, we're not even going to use the full $900,000 that was in this other account. We'll still have $400,000 to do, other potential things with if we need to find money for other stuff. So I feel comfortable moving forward with the way that this has been laid out.
All right. Any other? Yes.
I was gonna ask, so what would the other $400,000 go towards? Has that been identified? Just out of curiosity.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
So if council has any ideas, that 400,000 remaining still has the ARPA deadline of 2026 to be spent.
I don't think so. This was, I think, just a normal project that I don't know where the money came from. I don't think it's necessarily
ARPA money.
They're
Okay.
asking about the
Asp Avenue
Yes.
parking lot.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sean's money.
All right. Well, I think based on that feedback, we'll leave the term sheet as it is, and it will be for your consideration on the 24th meeting. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, discussion regarding council priority framework, committee process, and structure for AIM Norman Comprehensive Plan.
I hope you're not looking at me for a presentation.
I wasn't, I was just
Okay.
wondering who was moving down there.
Well, my understanding is, I was out of town during the last BACA meeting, but there was a discussion about priorities and things related to AIM Norman. And Brenda had sent out an email, I think, asking for feedback, and so I think this session was to gather that feedback and discuss the setup.
And Councilmember Peacock's not here.
Yeah.
I think what he was trying to do was align the AIM process, the comprehensive plan process, with the One Norman goals and objectives, and he found some goals from Minneapolis
I believe so.
and in there. What kind of discussion do we need to have? What are your thoughts on that? My thoughts, to start with, those goals weren't, the kind of goals I write usually have something that's measurable, something that's time-oriented, something that is achievable, something that is going to work where we can measure what it is. And I remember getting hooked up on one of them that said we were gonna do better air quality. And it was very vague, very mushy in what it was. And I thought, well, I don't know that that's applicable. There are some things in there that were applicable that we could use, and we could use as a framework for judging whether this is good or not. But that wouldn't be one of them. But if we rephrase that to be, we don't contribute to more, you know, we do what we can to improve our emissions and stuff, that would be some phrasing differences. I think most of those would work.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What is the year goal of the new plan? Is it open-ended or
2045.
2045? Okay. Yeah, see, Minneapolis, they identify, or they repeat 2040 a bunch of times in theirs. I guess that's what they picked, but I think that's maybe part of what Councilor Peacock was talking about, was that they've set goals and dates to try and reach those goals.
I would agree to that.
And through a similar process that the One Norman process was.
And even on those environmental goals, more and more of those are measurable. Michelle Audenbeck kind of understands that recognition of measuring greenhouse gases. We actually just had a conversation with ACOG staff that's coming out with a grant the first grant is to identify like greenhouse gas emission sources in your community, and then a next round of grant funding to help mitigate and back those numbers back down.
That'd be 100% easy.
Timely.
Yeah. Councilmember Grant?
Yeah, I was just reviewing all of them because we also had a land use and transportation plan from before that had goals and policies. And I do see and appreciate where Councilmember Peacock was trying to interject some of Minneapolis's, because you won't really find equity and inclusion in the other two. Although I value civic IQ being in the One Norman. But that said, I would like to see it, but I'm a little confused with the way it works with AIM Norman, because they made it very clear in their structure that the framework comes after a round or two of community feedback. But I do think it would be good for them when they're doing it to have a few dimensions in mind. So yeah. I'm kind of conflicted, because if you said it at the beginning, then what are you getting at that second step? Or have you taken out that second step of where they're creating a framework?
Yeah, my thoughts are similarly aligned to kind of that line of thinking in terms of, since we met with the consultants last week, really trying to understand, what are the goals. And I see on kind of our agenda, we have the goals from the 2025 plan. And it's really clear that like we have the goals and then the policies that are under that. And so I think that that's what gets developed during the process, right? During the land use plan and, you know, all of that kind of coming together, that then those I think are the measurable, attainable, time bound, SMARTY goals,
Yep.
essentially. And I think it's, so that I'm trying to like figure out what I want to say about this, but I think there's potentially a way for council to say, these are the things that we're thinking about that also then get included into what comes out in the public kind of meetings and discussion, and then like that gets filtered in. I don't want to be rigid enough to set like, these are explicitly what council is doing, because then we're taking out all of the important conversations that our community members need to have as we develop this plan. I'm also a little hesitant to, you know, have the One Norman, I guess, goals kind of incorporated into exactly like something that we're voting on moving forward, because I personally still have, I guess, concerns about the things that were voted on through that process and like what the voting process actually was. And I think the moving timeline that was One Norman, because I participated in those initial meetings, and you know, some of these things, you know, were not talked about on our initial visioning board, and then ultimately ended up in final priorities, because I think that there was some ways that they were voting on things at the end and not everybody voted, and there was a dilution of kind of that core group that was starting out the process, and then, you know, they asked for another meeting and then people didn't commit to that, and so there was less people, and then there was online voting, and I think there was a lot of confusion about what got distilled down into the final product of that. So I wouldn't necessarily want to draft or like use that draft as a, you know, a defining thing. Like, I think that there are some good elements and pieces in
I would
this.
agree.
But I would still like our community, through the process of the community meetings and all of that kind of stuff, be able to pull out the things and really highlight what is going on. So like the visioning process was good. It started us thinking about what those could look like. But ultimately our comprehensive plan and the whole process needs to really be what dictates, because that's ultimately what council is going to adopt
It's law.
as our, you know, guiding force moving forward as we develop our community. So that's a lot of stuff to say that, like, you know, there are some things that I think we're all, no pun intended, aiming for in, you know, the goals of this, but I don't know. I'm still a little confused how council can kind of get across the things that we are wanting to prioritize, or if like there can be a separate discussion about how our views and things get incorporated with those public comments and like the listening sessions or the town halls, or like however they're gonna kind of filter out. Like, I want to make sure that the public is really being heard.
Exactly. And
through
I
this
think a lot of
process.
that'll be conversations too that happen. But there'll have to be special sessions or doing whatever we need to do to sit down and move along. Here's this product that they come up with. Is this what we want? And those One Norman goals are still in draft. I noticed was across there, so they haven't been refined. I would agree that incorporating them in would be too rigid, but using them for us, as you suggest, as just being, this is the spirit of how things go, I think might work.
I think it could be a potential document that members of the public have access to when we talk about what's being moved forward, but that it is not like we are adopting that and this is what we're moving forward with. Like, I think it's a piece of the conversation. And we can then, you know, there was only a certain number of people that were a part of that visioning process, and so being able to go out and hopefully have more members of the public
Yeah.
kind of look at that and then look at what we want to do and what our goals are, to kind of infuse, you know, those thoughts about how we're moving forward.
I would agree. And we should learn from some of that in the process of what the citizens want, where they're aiming to. Because if we're off by a degree or whatever, by the time we get down the end, it's a big, big thing. Councilmember Grant?
I will say I went to the steering committee meeting and do think that, just to bring it back around to civic IQ, that they should be doing homework. They talked about, like, should we read the land use 2025 plan? Yes. And that way they could also look over these documents as well as they're working towards a framework. But yeah, I know some of them probably already have, but I generally think all of them should, especially if they're going to be working on it.
Other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I think having the AIM plan and the goals that are identified in there, and I think reading the 2025 plan and looking at the goals that were in there as well, and figuring out what applies to current situations, what do we think now is going to happen in 20 years, I think would all be helpful for the committee members to be looking at and for the council.
It's a tremendous job, and combining all of those plans together is going to be wonderful. It won't be when you're doing it and figuring out where all those pieces of string align, but when we've got them, it's going to be so much less confusing for people to come in and understand what we think we ought to do. And as I keep on, my harping song is we got to look at it every 5 years, because it just, stuff changes so fast. And goes. All right, yes, ma'am.
Catherine, as agendized, is it appropriate to talk about the process by which the committee is selecting chair, subcommittee chair heads? So I think this has been a little bit of cause for confusion, I think, on our side and potentially on the side of the steering committee. And it's not, maybe it is already explicitly outlined, but there were some things that we were talking about to really ensure that we understand what that process is going to look like in the potential revision, or I guess amended version of the resolution. So can you maybe talk to us about how it is currently laid out and what that process is going to look like?
Yes, I can tell you what's in the current resolution. As you said, we're drafting an amended resolution to address a member of the steering committee who declined to participate in replacing that person. So that will be on your agenda on the 24th. Currently, what the resolution says is that the steering committee shall create subcommittees to assist in these tasks, after talking about everything they'll be doing, and that a member of the steering committee shall serve as chair to each of these subcommittees. Each subcommittee member shall be vetted according to their knowledge, skill, background, or expertise in the subject to be addressed in each subcommittee, and all subcommittee members shall be approved by a simple majority vote of the AIM Norman Steering Committee.
Okay, so the things that I have concerns about are that on the subcommittees, it explicitly talks about, expertise, this, that, and the other. And I think that doesn't leave enough room for members of our community that might be interested in and could provide feedback into those committees. It also does not explicitly lay out how we are selecting the subcommittee members as a whole, because typically in those processes we have, for all of our boards and commissions, there's an application. That's how we were selecting members for the steering committee. So I have concerns about how are those names being brought forward? Who is vetting those? Is it just the steering committee? I feel like we need some more guidelines around, just so that everybody is operating from the same set of understanding. This is how the chairs are being selected. This is how the committee members are being selected for those, so that our public understands like if they would like to participate in that, like what the process is to put their name forward. So is it possible for us to draft, I guess, more explicit language within the resolution that kind of guides what that selection process is gonna look like?
Sure.
Yeah, I would like it to be a little bit more inclusive on who might be able to serve. And then ultimately that not only are the steering committee voting on the chairs, but I think that the steering committee should also vote on the committee members. Like, I don't think that the subcommittee chair gets to just pick whoever they want to be on their committees. Like, I think that there needs to be some kind of vetting process through the committee.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think if I can find the section. 13. Yeah, the subcommittee members do get approved by a simple majority vote of the committee, steering committee, not just the chairs, but.
Okay, yeah, I just would like to know a little bit more about how people can identify themselves to serve on those various subcommittees.
What happened was we took all the applications that we had, remember that whole big slew? And Elizabeth got those, Elizabeth McKinney got those. And then I think she made that decision. I can't swear to that, but
Well,
that's
and
what she was.
that's specifically why I'm asking for more clarification, because at the council level, we have, we're voting, it's not just like you put forward names, but then, we're voting and also like the public has a clear expectation on how they apply for any of those boards and commissions that we're, potentially vetting them for. So I would like the members of the public who maybe didn't hear about it the first time around and now have a specific qualification for one of those subcommittees to be able to have a process. So like not throwing out maybe the names of people that didn't make the steering committee, but at least they applied and
Yeah.
we have their information,
And that was-
resumes and things like that. If there are additional names, I would like people to have a process.
Sure, and
Yeah.
and there was a bank of persons that weren't on the steering committee after all of our discussions, and it was that group that went to the steering committee and Elizabeth to be able to get vetted for how it was supposed to flow out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that I think that some part of this process has like been cart before the horse, and so even from what I heard, even before we had voted on the exact steering committee, that there were conversations about who was chairing subcommittees and all kinds of things, and it's gotten a little wonky. So I would like to just have some more parameters around what people can expect, not only the steering committee but also the public. And I think we just need to be really transparent about this process, because I will speak for myself, but I think that we are all in agreement that like we really have to do this thing right. It is imperative. We are coming up on 2025, which is where our current land use plan goes to, and we're doing this as a comprehensive plan in a way that nobody else has ever done it, with all of our different plans, like transportation and stormwater and water and wastewater. Like we are pioneering. It's a very novel idea in the way that we are approaching this, and so I think some of this is the growing pains of trying to figure out exactly how we're going to streamline all of this. But if we don't have clear policies and procedures that we're all operating from the very beginning, I just don't want us to get down the line, because ultimately council will have to approve and vote on this, that something went off the rails at some point. And so if we can have clear boundaries that we're working from, then I think we can all feel more confident.
And I think that'll help us too, as those committees attrit, which they naturally will, how do we select persons to come back and fill those gaps? And then how do we do that? It makes it easy. It's just a procedural thing.
Right. That's really what I'm asking
Speaking
for.
for Catherine, but
Yeah, and can we have, maybe a list of names that we're also, once we kind of figure out, like, what is the vetting process for when we have attrition?
yeah,
Similarly to the steering committee
sure.
as well.
Councilmember Grant?
I was going to say, agreed on this being very important and wanting to set it up correctly from the beginning. Mostly, as I understand it, like our land use plan is what we go to court with when somebody wants to argue with us, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's the first step.
yeah, I'd love to make sure that it's a pretty tight defense.
It is. I'm really excited about the idea. When we started on this idea of comprehensive, the conversations that were going on at the time were, we need to go look at this plan, this plan, this plan, and this plan. I'm thinking, why do we have I know why we have so many plans, because you have to take small bites to eat the elephant kind of a thing, but to get them in one compendium is just, it's gonna be a book, and it's gonna be amazing. I think it's going to be something that gives people some confidence in being able to ask the question, if I want to build this, where can I build that, and do other things. The idea of PUDs and SPUDs are great, but boy howdy, it just goofs up zoning stuff. And it just, we have to do it because of the way we're doing, but it would be so nice to be able to say, why don't you go down to this corner and build this kind of thing that you want, and make it easy. So, other thoughts or anything? All right, I'll go on to the next item.
If I may.
Oh, yes, sir.
I think I've got all the feedback written down, but I will work on a draft and send it out and make sure that I've captured it before putting it on the agenda, but we'll put it on for the 24th.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 3, consideration of adjourning into executive session is authorized by Oklahoma statutes 25, section 307B1, in order to discuss the hiring of the city auditor. I need a motion to adjourn out of special session and convene into executive session.
So moved.
Second. Vote. Yeah, we vote.
And we are now in executive session.
Don't we have to
Need to
vote?
vote.